Hello, hello, and welcome back to the Inner Fellowship of Men, Angels, and Spirits. This is Justin here with another live stream. I don't expect this live stream to be long, but then again, they've just been getting longer and longer. So, feel free to 2x this if you really want to watch this, or, if this is something you just got playing in your background just to have something playing. I hope that it goes on without a hitch. Got enough changes here. It looks like hooking my Chromebook directly up to the internet has solved the problem of the freezing, if my last live stream tells us anything. I did a little bit of reorganizing of the room so I could get a bit more softer lighting, hoping that really just improves things without really increasing my expenses. And of course, I'm here with a message, I believe, for the Inner Fellowship of Men, Angels, and Spirits. And of course, I believe I call the Inner Fellowship of Men, Angels, and Spirits what Jesus referred to as the Father's kingdom, his Father's kingdom, which is not of this world, but very definitely does have a major influence on this world, and therefore leaves us in a place where we can often become confused and think that even though we are kingdom believers and members of the kingdom, that we need to be so preoccupied with matters of this world. And it's not to say that we shouldn't. It's not to say that just because we are born of the Spirit and we're living within the Father's kingdom, that we are unconcerned with the matters of this world. It's really more a matter of our concern with the matters of this world should come with the understanding that it is the choices that we make in negotiating those things and what they mean to us and our standing in the Father's kingdom, in the spiritual kingdom, in our inner life that matters most. It's not so much about what actually happens as a result of our choices in this world, although those things do matter, but really the ultimate thing, the ultimate reality, the ultimate greatness, and the goal of existence is actually for that escalation of our personality status by way of making choices that are increasingly more and more spiritual. And I tend to use current events, primarily the politics of the day, as just a means of kind of modeling that or demonstrating that. I don't at all intend for anyone to be as preoccupied with the matters of the day as particularly spiritual matters. That being the case, it is true that the issues of the day are spiritual, and I mean to demonstrate just how spiritual they are, or at least how I can interpret them to be spiritual, and you are at liberty to do the same. Okay, so what's going on these days? It seems like if I have to really try to list it, I'm going to go too long. I always have, I take a mental note of all the things I'd like to talk about, all the things that basically I talk about in my prayers with the Father, the indwelling Spirit, and the kind of impressions I take as a result of that. And there are so many things, and almost always it's just the last thing I happen to be exposed to that tends to dominate the conversation. I don't want that to happen this time. So I have recently been using my thumbnail to try to keep me on track. So if it looks like my thumbnails are not very informative to you, they are informative to me as they leave visual impressions of the things that I did want to talk about. And of course, we have some tragic news of happy Thanksgiving, first of all, for the people who are in America. I believe it's America, possibly Canada as well, although I think Canada celebrates on a different day. Happy Thanksgiving. Happy for the beginning of this holiday season. And though Jesus' birthday was not really on December 25th, it's not like there's a better day to celebrate based on any real consensus on when his birthday was. That is a great day to consolidate of all people of all beliefs and practices to have a sort of solstice celebration in the darkest time of the year and bringing the light, such as it is. And so happy beginning of the holiday season. I hope whatever holiday that you celebrate, whatever religion is that you practice or observe, I hope that you can enjoy it. I hope that you are open enough. I hope that your religion and your perception of religion does not so constrain you that it stops you from being able to acknowledge and even celebrate the religion of others. There's nothing wrong with that. I don't think that there's any reason in Judaism that you should not be able to celebrate Christmas, or any reason in Christianity that you should not be able to acknowledge the high holy days of Ramadan, and this kind of thing. At some point, we do have to realize that if we're talking about a God who is a creator of all, then a worship of him has to be inclusive of all of the many children and all their many ways of perceiving him. That must be. If it is not, then you're not worshiping the Most High, you're worshiping something less. And we may hopefully get to what that is by the end of this live stream. But the tragic news we have is that, okay, my last live stream was last Tuesday, and then the next day, the day before Thanksgiving, of someone who I can only assume to be another mentally ill person, which is not uncommon in America or in the world, an Afghani migrant to America, who basically came to America as a refugee when America sort of exited from Afghanistan. He was one of the translators and people who helped America, and if he had stayed in Afghanistan, he probably would have been killed by Taliban, who quickly reclaimed leadership as soon as America left. So he was granted permission to stay in America, and for reasons that have not been clearly explained to me, he has, wherever he was living, I don't believe it was in DC, but he packed up his car and drove quite a ways to go to DC so that I guess he could make his attack against the military occupation of the District of Columbia. As you know, as you should know, the President of America, Donald Trump, has decided to occupy certain cities and certain states, we believe to be as a political maneuver, but I believe to be as a political maneuver, but some people say that it needs to be done because the crime is so bad. And so what they have done is they've sent the National Guard into DC to sort of, I guess, protect federal sites. There are plenty of federal sites. They've also sent the National Guard and certain military into Los Angeles and Chicago. And of course, this has caused lots of controversy. And I guess this Afghani was swept up in this controversy and got emotionally caught up in something and ended up, grabbing a gun, going to DC, and as best I can tell, just shooting random National Guard members. And from what I have heard, at least two were critically injured and were in the hospital. One subsequently has passed on. I mean, they were shot in the face, and it's kind of hard to survive that. And even if you can survive that, it's hard to survive that well. So this is a true tragedy. These are not even full-time military in a time of war, in war occupation. These are sort of, I don't want to say part-time military, but they're the National Guard or the National Reserves. I'm not sure which one exactly, but the purpose is really just to defend the shores of America, or to react in times of national emergency. They're not really just supposed to be sitting there as a target for random loons who might just resent, their representation, their being symbols of government overreach. In any event, this poor woman didn't have to die. And of course, Donald Trump and the people who would support him would say that, okay, this only happened because the Biden administration had a policy of admitting anyone into the country, and because there was such bad vetting, this person from Afghanistan was admitted into the country, allowed to be here, and clearly he is a violent individual who should not be in America, just like so many thousands or millions of other immigrants who are in America right now with only meaning to do harm. And of course, I mean, I'm just gonna, articulate my bias by saying that that is how they choose to perceive the circumstances. That best upholds their disposition and so be it. If other people would look at it a different way and say that, conditions were created that have gotten people so angered with being occupied by the state and with the political turmoil that the country is in, that violence is happening. It is happening. It is not something that political leaders are calling for necessarily, lest you talk about what the president actually said about, the senators who told the military that they should not follow illegal orders. He actually called for them to be hanged, right? So there's that. But it's not like there's any opposition leadership that's saying we need to kill this person, we need to kill that person. It's just that things are at such a frenzy that people who are mentally unstable are now beginning to do unstable things. And to be honest with you, I think a lot of people are committing suicide by police, really, and trying to go out with their name on TV. I mean, it's lots of people, especially men, would love to, when there's nothing going for them, when things are horrible in their circumstances, they would love to be able to just go out in a blaze of glory. And whether go out means to die or go out means to go to prison, but basically they're not really willing to continue the fight to live this free life of working hard and trying to pay the bills and trying to raise a family, and they're just not up to all of that. And so they would just like to retire from that in the most awe-striking way. And that's, I think, what this person was trying to do. And he did that, right? So you've got this, immediately there's this hullabaloo about whose fault is this? Is it Biden's fault? Is it Trump's fault? Because it was during the Biden administration that America withdrew from Afghanistan, but it was Trump who actually set the policy that we would withdraw from Afghanistan. And it was during the Biden administration that this person was applying for sort of refuge and exile status in America. But it was during the Trump, administration that he was actually permitted to enter the country. And so the Trump people are saying, well, yeah, but he was vetted by the Biden administration, and people who might support the Biden administration will say, yeah, but you admitted him that you didn't. That means you didn't find anything wrong with him either. And the truth is, there's no amount of vetting that's going to be able to tell you 100% what a person is going to do when they enter the country. Obviously, if this person had a history of assassinating people or shooting military, he wouldn't have been allowed to enter the country. This is not what this person had a history of doing, and so there was no reason why he would have been barred from coming into the country. But he does clearly have some instability, and it's not like it's an instability that's so uncommon considering the political climate, and to be honest with you, the spiritual climate there in America and around the world. Okay, so that happened, and the poor young lady has passed away. Another man the young man is in critical condition, and all during the holidays, because the president wanted to use the military. In my opinion, the president wanted to use the military to accomplish some kind of optics. It basically to show that he is authoritatively taking over the cities whose leadership might be politically, antithetical to his own, and who he has in his own mind, whether truthfully or otherwise, has popped up in his own mind as being overrun with illegals or undesirables or criminals, or all of these things tend to really mesh into the same thing when you get into a sort of authoritarian regime, such as we have right now. So yeah, that's happened. And that's a tragedy. And the fact that the immediate response is just to figure out who should we blame politically because of it is a tragedy, because that means we're not recognizing the true spiritual issue, the mental illness that comes from not dealing with the spiritual issue at hand. But that's a thing that happened. And then recently, I guess we should just point out that over the Thanksgiving holiday, okay, Donald Trump did his usual rant. You know, he does this holiday thing, says happy holiday, and then he starts to just start to take pot shots at everyone that he doesn't like in the country, basically antagonizing half of the country, saying that they are, pedophiles, or they're terrorists, or they're, and it just basically says that all these bad people, it's really just chumming the waters for his supporters to make sure that in this time of the time that we should be beginning to worship, or at least appreciate the fundamentals of our existence. That's what a holy day ought to be. He wants to make sure that his followers don't forget that there's a fight going on, and it's a political fight, and as long as they were fighting that political fight, he can keep his popularity up, at least among his base. So he's just always going to throw this chum out into the waters and just say, don't forget, we hate these people, and the enemy within is all in our midst, and don't get so caught up in being so happy on your holidays with your family that you forget that we are at war, essentially. Okay, and so shortly after Thanksgiving, we get this news break that, well, I don't know, if you haven't been watching my live stream, you certainly haven't been paying close attention to my thumbnails. But my thumbnails, I put a little effort into making thumbnails that are somewhat indicative of the things I have in mind, and that I might want to speak about, even if I don't get to them all. But maybe about a month ago, 2 months ago, we'll say, I created a live stream that had a thumbnail that was showing the first Venezuelan boat that had been targeted and destroyed by American bombers. The pretense being, and I'm going to say the pretense because there's no way that this is the only reason. So the pretense being that it was a drug that had drug dealers on it, or drug sellers on it, and it had drugs on it, and those drugs were headed toward America. We now know that such a boat as it was, now we seem to have much clearer video of the boat, was really closer to like a speedboat than like a real ship. Couldn't have been holding many drugs. And if it was holding a lot of people, any more than 3 or 4 people, then those people were in very uncomfortable circumstances, and were certainly not traveling on some luxury excursion. They may have been people trying to flee the country, or they probably weren't fishermen. That's probably not the case. But the point is that news came out, and at that time we already understood that you can't just bomb a boat because we're not in war. You can't just bomb it. This was a boat coming from Venezuela, presumably full of Venezuelan citizens. And though we thought they were doing something illegally, since we hadn't proven it in the court of law, and we haven't brought them to justice to do so, we just killed them. That's not really considered justice. That is considered, at the very least, murder. And and going toward the high end of things, an act of war. And when I say an act of war, what I mean is, I'm not saying that it means that a war has started, but what it means is that it is an act that can signal to the other party that they may retaliate, and therefore open warfare between these two parties. Now, Venezuela has not done so, so no war has subsequently ensued, right? Venezuela has not attacked American troops, American land, abroad or domestic. There has been no retaliation for these attacks on their ship. We have subsequently attacked other ships. But what we're finding out was that with this first attack, it took 2 taps, as we try to say. They say an assassin, a professional assassin, when they shoot, they tap the trigger twice. They take two shots because they want to make sure, even if they get a direct hit, that a second bullet will surely make sure that that person is dead. So we call it two taps. And in this case, that the second tap is really a second attack. What they did was they flew over, they bombed the boat. The boat was destroyed, but there were some survivors remaining. And the reporting that we had heard is that turns out there were maybe two or maybe three survivors kind of hanging on to parts of the wreckage floating in the water. And the command was made for the second tap. That is for the fighter to fly around, fighter or the bomber or whatever it is. I'm not sure what vehicle was actually executing these maneuvers, would fly around and make sure that the survivors were dead. And of course, that's illegal. That is not only murder, but what we understand is now that even if we were at war, that would be a war crime. And there's a reason why I say that would be a war crime, and that's because we are not at war. So it doesn't make sense to even speak of war crimes when we are not at war. It's not a war crime. It is a crime against humanity. It's worse than a war crime. A war crime is when you're caught up in the heat of war and in the fog of war and you do something immoral, and it is later determined in our international court system that this goes against what we had previously decided after World War II and subsequent wars, that there were sort of a code of conduct that we engage in even when we are at war. This is not even that. There is no war. We are not at war, not materially. We are not at war. Right? That is not a thing. Venezuela has not declared war against us. We have not officially declared war against Venezuela. Only the Congress has the right to approve that we do declare war. We have certain war powers were given to the presidency in prosecuting the war against terrorism in the Middle East, but even then, it was really only about there being a preemptive strike necessary, having to do with an existential crisis upon Americans. But the Venezuelans had proven no existential crisis to America. Even if those drugs could have made it to America and even been sold and even put into the hands of, let's say, children, it would not have been an existential crisis to America. It would not have been a war. Even when we said in the 80s that we were executing a war on drugs, it was understood that this was not giving the president special wartime powers, although we did indeed abuse many international laws in executing that war on drugs, so-called war on drugs. We didn't exactly start blowing up, innocent citizens or innocent of any crime that was worthy of being blown up, but we probably did plenty of other illegal things. It came to be known that we actually got into the drug dealing business and were making money and selling arms and doing things that were really illegal and under the table. That all came up during the Reagan years. You can search Ollie North, and you can hear you'll be able to get a little rundown of that if you weren't alive at that time. But this is the thing. So okay, we bombed the ship, then we killed the survivors. Okay, so now that is not a war crime. That is a war. That's a crime against humanity. That's what that is, right? And that didn't come out until now, some 3 months later, right? I remember in my live stream, I was complaining about that there does seem to be this overall sense. And while we use words like white supremacy, it really tends to really obfuscate the matter more than clarify. The reason why it is used is because it is a sense that largely is harbored by quote unquote white people, because they have the power to harbor this sense that they are the real and the pure people, and the other people are expendable. So, for example, The 11 or so people who died in that boat, we find out now that a few of them, at least two of them, were killed even when they couldn't even be argued that they could possibly be a threat. They were expendable, right? They were evil. They were whatever we want to call them. We can just project whatever we want onto them to justify this crime that we have committed. And you'll find in our history, we have a long history of doing that. And when I say we, I mean those among us who wield this sense of superiority or supremacy over others, usually white people, over people of color, to just be able to colorize them as criminals, as illegals, as undesirables, and therefore we can do with them what we want. Right? We don't have to just talk about slavery to see how this has been implicated from one generation to the next, going on down to like Roman times, right? Not to say that the Romans were all white at the time, but what I'm saying is this sense of supremacy over the locals, over the natives, wherever that you go, this sense that you have a dominance that extends beyond where you come from and just flows on into where other people are living, that you can come and claim their territory and then claim them to be undesirable in your land. This legacy, I will not say that it is because of a color, but it just tends to be associated with what we now call the white or the Occidental people, right? The people of the northern and northeastern European areas, whether they were across the Caucasus Mountains or not. These are now people that now identify themselves, and we would all commonly identify as white. And they therefore believe that they have the right and the responsibility to do this everywhere they go. Right? It did not stop in Rome. It did not stop all the way up to Turkey until it was stopped by the Ottoman Empire. All the way over up, it did not stop until it got to England, where it met water. It did not stop until it got to China, where there was a match, and it did not stop until it got to America, where there was a revolution. But it was just a steady encroachment into foreign lands and claiming it to be theirs, and then claiming that they were the prevailing culture that then everyone else must now conform to. And not only that, but if it can be demonstrated to their own satisfaction that there are those who are not and therefore do not, then they are expendable. I mean, if they're useful, they can be kept, but if they're not, they can be killed. And we don't have to feel so bad about that, right? 11 people in a boat just died. We just call themselves drug dealers, call them drug dealers, or what's the word? Narco-terrorists. We use the word narco-terrorist, which is not an actual thing. You know, terrorism is it's a political act. You cause harm to people, and so that they will fear, so that you can accomplish a political end. Selling drugs is just a business thing. It may be a criminal business, but it's just a business thing. It's not a political agenda. It doesn't meet with a political end directly. And so this narco terrorism, it's a kind of wordplay that was used often in the 80s and the war against drugs, but it's not a thing. These are just people who may or may not be following local or international laws. But it in no way makes their lives less valuable. And the same is the case for the people who are domestically in America. That certain people can just call them illegals. You know, like as if there is some law of the land that makes them less valuable. Where you can say that, you know, You have God-given rights, but God only gave those rights to Americans. Right. I mean, that's really what the feeling is, right? So if anybody else should end up on these lands, they don't have those same rights. They don't have the same value. So one white woman, God rest her soul, dies because some random brown person shot her in the face while she was serving the country, or while she's just taking the bus, whatever it is. That one white person's life is so much more valuable. The loss of that life is so much more tragic than 11, than 20, than 40, than 100, than 1,000 brown people over there somewhere. Yeah, that's what I want to talk about today. And I want to say that this is not just like something I'm going to say is racism. It is the problem of inequity and the troubles that become associated when a certain group of people who can identify with a certain sense of unity can then look at another group of people and see them as less than. But it's not something that, happens only because white people are doing it. I mean, if the situations were reversed, there's no reason to believe that, for example, what we see in Africa, that wouldn't be happening. That if Black Africans suddenly did have the same authority, the power, the organization, the hegemony that white people previously had within their continent, that they wouldn't be just as ruthless with white people, but for the fact that they have the benefit, and I'm calling it a benefit, of such a troubled history, that they should know better. And I believe that most Black people, even now in America, who have never been enslaved but have a sort of ancestral brown people, Latinos, the cultural history is different. For Asians, the cultural history is different. But I think there needs to be a certain deference to that experience and the knowledge, the knowing better because of what has happened to you. You know better, or that you should know better. When you have been treated as the lowest of the low, you know better than to treat someone as if they are lower than you. That being said, a large number of children who are abused, who the worst has been done to, may grow to become people who do their worst. They do their worst. And there is this tendency that we seem to have to think that the people who have been put upon may then be judged for how harshly they begin to negotiate the world after having been so put upon. I mean, a white kid goes and, assassinates someone, and we could say that's a troubled youth. If it was a Black guy who did that this is a menace to society, right? And I don't need to point that out. That's something that it's a part of life. And I don't say get used to it, but I do say, be as wise as serpents and as peaceful as doves in dealing with it, because it's not going away anytime too soon. Even so, how does it go away? Well, it doesn't go away by just having a Black president, right? I mean, Barack Obama was a president of America. He was, as far as I'm concerned, a decent president. But it wasn't like because Barack Obama was the president of the United States that suddenly brown people weren't dropping like flies for every white person around the world in warlike conditions, whether war had been declared or not. It wasn't like that wasn't occurring, right? The problem is deeper than any one leader can change, but it actually is. It's something that's much easier to make worse than it is to make better. And now we have a leader that's happy to make it worse. Worse from my perspective, because I guess because I am a black person, and also because I know better than to think that there will ever be a world of racial dominance that will sustain itself. There never has been, and there never will be. The best possible outcomes have occurred when there has been increased harmony. And that has not been the same thing as cultural compatibility, which is what I hear people saying now. I mean, I'm hearing a lot of white pundits saying, we have the right to decide that some cultures are just not compatible with ours. No, you don't. No more than they have a right to decide whether your culture is compatible with theirs. When you're in a country like America, no one owns it. And while you can say that this is a Christian country, and then you can say it's a Judeo-Christian country somehow, which really is a contradiction, all you're really saying is that the religion of the majority of people are thus. But there's nothing in that saying that could ever keep it that way. Trust me, I live in a country where the religion of the majority of people is thus. And yet they struggle to keep it that way. And why? Because they don't even practice their own religion. I mean, they practice it as far as rituals and decorations and traditional foods and clothing and things like that. But when it comes to the matters of spirit, no, it is at best a religion of the mind, at best, and mostly not even that. And while there were so many other things I wanted to talk about, in the interest of brevity, I want to say that's the reason why this live stream is called Jesus, Buddha of War. Because in my experience in Japan, I mean, Japanese people will be the first to tell you that they are a Buddhist country. And even as they say that, there will be a number among them, maybe not a majority, but a number among them who will say it with resentment because they wish that it were a Shinto country. In truth, Buddhism has overtaken Japan in the same way that Christianity has overtaken the Occidental Europe. And before that, there were these pagan traditions and religions in Europe. The Norwegians had their gods, and the Scandinavians had their gods, I should say. The Gaelics had their gods and their religions and their practices, and they were absorbed by Christianity, making Christianity what it is for them in that region. Well, in the same way, the beliefs and traditions of Japanese people were sort of absorbed by Buddhism, making Buddhism what it is today in Japan. But even if someone were to say we are a Buddhist country, if I asked them, okay, tell me, what did the Buddha teach? They wouldn't be able to tell you. If I say, okay, what do Buddhists believe? They couldn't put it into a simple phrase, a catchphrase like Christians do. Oh, they believe Jesus Christ, the Lord and Savior. No, then they couldn't put it into a simple phrase like that, because if I say, what is your favorite Buddhist sutra? I mean, there are many different sects of Buddhism in Japan based on the many different bodies of the sutra, of the Buddhist sutra, written by Siddhartha Gautama, whose name they probably don't know, the original Buddha, and subsequent followers whose names they don't know. And all these sects, maybe the founders of these sects, they might know these names. They may know the name of like Shinran, or they might know the name of Nichiren, or they might know the name of, right now, the most important one that brought Buddhism to Japan. His name escapes me. But they might know these names as historical figures, but they won't even know what they taught. They won't know the core essentials and how they are foundational to modern Japanese society. There is a lot of Zen Buddhism that really did sort of marry with the Bushido and create what is like what we find to be having the most cultural relevance in things like tea ceremony and flower arrangement and everything from like that to martial arts. All of those things, there is that sort of harmonization, we'll say, between Buddhism and Shinto that is found in these traditions, but there's not an intellectual awareness of it. It's more like an intuitive appreciation of a way of living or a way of being, thinking, doing, that they could not explain so easily as to say that because Siddhartha Gautama said this, therefore we do that, right? There's nothing like that. And for that reason, as I've said previously, they are in jeopardy, not because foreigners are coming into the country, but because they need foreigners to come into the country. And while they have a strong cultural identity, that as strong as that cultural identity is, it will not be able to withstand the cultural identity of people who have a faith conviction that goes along with that cultural identity. A faith conviction that comes not only from an understanding, but from an both intellectual and emotional attachment to that understanding. And in many ways, Japan is sort of, Japanese culture and Japanese ethos is sort of the antithesis of that. And for that reason, it's going to be very easy for Japan to be flexible with different values coming in, but it's going to be very hard to make sure that the values that have gotten them this far will endure into the future. So what they want to do is like the same thing that white people in America or in Western Europe want to do. They want to build a wall to keep all of those other foreigners out with their values, and that they feel like will change them. And the problem with that, as I've said before, is that that only means that they'll isolate and die. And then when those people do finally take over that land, nothing of their cultural value will remain. And the same thing's happening in America. So many people are calling themselves Christian, and they're saying that they think that America is based on Christian values, but they don't know what Christian is. I mean, they know what it is as far as they may know a few chapters and verses in the Bible, but the way that it confers value on the things that they do from day to day, they don't seem to be as immediately conversant with that. And they don't think they need to be. So the simple fact that, they can go to church and worship Jesus and after church be nothing like him shows that really Jesus in America is little more for many Americans than Buddha is for the average Japanese or East Asian person. What did he do? What did he say? Who is he really? Is he real? Doesn't matter. What matters is I have the emotional comfort of being able to know I can go into this room where there is this symbol and I dedicate myself for the moment to this symbol, and I feel like I've worshiped and I've exercised that muscle, and then I go off and go out and do the same things I would have done if whether I went in there or not. And I pay a priest or a monk to do all the other heavier lifting religiously for me. That's what Christians have become. And what's worse is that at least the Buddha had left a legacy that continues to leave its mark on a people even who do not believe in the Buddha, people who do not engage in any particular religious practice relating to Buddhism necessarily. It has still left its mark. This notion of, for example, the war between good and evil is not a war to fight, that rather the middle path must be chosen, which is kind of like a primitive way of really what Jesus was really trying to say was resist not evil, simply choose the good. And the notion that you can be so dedicated to doing that, that even if it were to mean the end of your material life, still would it mean the bounty of spiritual being to come. Now, I understand that what Buddha was teaching, trying to find the middle way, is a lot easier than what Jesus was teaching, right? But now we've reached the point where we either put up or we shut up. And a lot of us are not putting up and we're not shutting up. And what by put up, I mean is we're not really bearing the fruits of the Spirit. We like to say Jesus' name a lot, but we don't seem to want to imitate him. You know, Christianity is unlike Buddhism in the sense that not only because Christianity is not as old, but really because a lot more was documented about Christianity through the legacy of Jewish people, Hebrew people, and of course how the Gentiles incorporated Christianity into their existence. And it really is, there's more of Jesus's teachings that are regularly accessible to human beings of this world than really the teachings of the Buddha. And it makes it possible, more possible, for us to see in Jesus not just something we can worship, but something we can aspire to, which is not something you can see in the Buddha. You just can't. Even if you know in detail the story of Siddhartha Gautama, which really most people don't know in detail, I don't even know if they can know it in detail, still, this is not a life that you would aspire to. You're not going to leave your family and your responsibilities to sit under a tree until you achieve enlightenment and then, you throw off all necessities and responsibilities of life and just teach what you've learned by doing so. Right? That's not what anyone expects anyone to do. It's reason why the most evolved form of Buddhism in Japan is what they call Jodo or Jodo Shin Buddhism, where a leader named Shinran actually did say, listen, we're not going to be able to do what Buddha did, and no one's going to be able to do it. You need to have faith in someone who can save us. Let's just call that someone Amida. And through faith in Amida, much like the Hindus came up with it, through faith in the Krishna, or some personality that can be a stand-in for what Christ is for Christians. Through faith alone can we be saved. And that has really helped to inspire a lot of Japanese people most recently. But I guess what's my real point here, right? The point is that there's religion of the mind, and then there's religion of the spirit. And a lot of people right now, the ones who say they are the most religious, who justify their biases and prejudices with religion. Primarily, they are expressing religion of the mind. And religion of the mind creates transformations in the mind. Those transformations must therefore be inclusive of what that mind is made of to begin with. A sculptor must sculpt from a certain substance. So the religion of the mind is sculpting from the substance of that mind. And minds are in different conditions in different cultures and different places. So we have what the religion about Jesus has sculpted in the West of the minds of the warlike people in the West. And I stuck in warlike for a reason, which should be obvious to you right now. But it is still the sculpting of those minds, not the transformation of those minds. That is something that happens in the religion of the spirit. But in religion of the mind, you just kind of just stamp Jesus's face on on the way that you already are. You don't change. You just stamp a face on the way that you already are. Just like in Japan, in many ways, they just stamp Buddhist image on the way that they already were. They just allowed their Shinto practices and beliefs and ways of being to just be dressed in Buddhist clothing. And that sufficed for centuries to give them a sense of, like we said, cultural identity. But the problem is that these, like I said, are just dressings on the mind that you are, not transformations of the mind, just dressings of the mind that might help you with people of similar minds. But when it comes to a time when you have to deal with people who are differently minded, the only hope are to have transformations that have come from something even deeper than the mind. Spiritual transformations that actually transform the being such that there is a commonality that can be understood despite the fundamental difference in ways of thinking, being, and doing that different people of different cultures might have. And that was the hope of Christianity. That was the American dream, if there ever was one. It was believed that if you could embrace the spiritual reality of certain values and principles that you live by. And those values and principles aren't the same thing as like the clothes you wear or the way you salute the flag or any kind of cultural or religious practice. No, it was more like an understanding of what our purpose and function and our existence was about in this country. And when you had an agreement in that respect, then you had an American identity. An American identity that was supposed to be like a stand-in for Christ's consciousness, wasn't it? That which can house any of many cultural identities and yet still achieve a unity that ought not be confused with uniformity, right? Out of many, one. Not out of many, one, if you are like me. No, no. Not out of many, one, if I can be like you. No. Out of many, one, it means that when no matter what you are like, you are now, by your faith, surrendering to a transformation, a rejuvenation of not just clothing the mind in a new belief system and some things to say, but actually transforming that mind, transforming the body, transforming the soul into something that could be adorable across cultures, because it adores across cultures. Not only tolerates others, begins to respect, appreciate, and love others, not because they are the same, but because it sees the value in what is different. That was supposed to be how America would be, the shining city on a hill. And now you hear more and more Americans giving way to this cultural identity based on the religion of the mind. And what does this render of Jesus, the Christ? No more than what the Buddha is in Japan. A statue. A statue that you just keep in your room, or you keep in a room in a dark place where you go from time to time, you light some incense, make yourself feel good that you've shown yourself to be dedicated and loyal to something, and then go out and do as you would, whether you were dedicated or loyal to it or not. And for a warlike people, well, if you just use Jesus as just like a Buddha statue, well, Jesus will never stop you from going to war in any way that you choose. I mean, most Christians understand Jesus to have come to this world to fight and win a spiritual war. And while people, I guess, at large don't seem to appreciate the fact that he did fight and did win that war, seem to assume, one, that that war, that spiritual war between good and evil is ongoing, and two, that that spiritual war between good and evil must be fought in some way that he never fought it and he never won it by. So now Jesus is just another idol, you're another good luck charm that you put around your neck as you go and do all the things he would never do. He's a little Buddha for you now. And because you have not changed, and you're still honestly worshiping a god of war in the spirit, well, Jesus is just your Buddha of war. He's not changing you. He's just being what you need him to be so that you can be the same, right? The religion that was born from a people, his own people, who would not accept him. And yet, his faith could be recognized from people who were not like him, because they could recognize the supremacy of that spirit and then take that religion unto themselves, even though they were of a different cultural identity. How faithless have we become to assume that that's only going to happen with people like us? That it could never happen for people who are not like us, unless and until they become like us by trying to be like us, not by trying to have a more deeper and fulfilling relationship with God through Jesus, but just by being like us, even though we are nothing like Jesus, being culturally compatible with us. And we feeling like, well, we should have nothing to learn, no reason to change at all, right? Anybody who wants to come and be here, they better be like me. I have nothing to learn. You want to come to me, you have to learn do what I do, right? I have the advantage, the cultural advantage. And spiritually, what am I? I'm the guy that thinks he's supposed to be at the first seat before Jesus. And I have forgotten that Jesus taught, if you were wise, you would choose the lower seat and then let Jesus tell you, oh no, come and be closer to me. Humility should have been your clothing. But now it is pride. And so you've rendered of Jesus just another idol, just another little Buddha that you've changed to be in your image so you can feel good about yourself as you don't change. Your faith extending only enough to believe that even though you have been so laggardly in your spiritual pursuit in life, yet still will Jesus save you. And he may. He very, very well may. I will share in that faith. But in the here and now, you should know you are lukewarm at best. When you make of Jesus just something to clothe your own warlike and unchanging and ungrowing soul. In truth, Jesus is preferred because Jesus is the Son. He's not the Father. He represents the Father in a way that we can, well, we can presume upon his authority in ways that we cannot presume upon the Father's authority. And in many ways, this is the course that Lucifer went down when he realized that if he can presume upon Jesus' authority and acknowledge no higher authority than him, then to divide Jesus is to divide nothing more than Jesus. And so maybe you've got something better to do. You've got a better way. And that's exactly what we do in our planetary soul consciousness. We clothe ourselves in Jesus' image, or what we think Jesus should look like, usually looks like us, and then go about doing as we would, as if our way is better than his way. As if his way, oh, that sounds good, in theory, right? But in practice, I'm going to go about things this way. America is not at war. You are not at war with the evildoers. You're not at war with the pedophiles. You're not at war with the Nazis. You're not at war with the fascists. You're not at war with the racists. You're not at war with the Satanists. You're not at war with the globalists. You're not at war with any of those things. But what is at war with those things? The idol that you call Jesus. The little Jesus Buddha of war. It's not the living Jesus. It's the carve out of Jesus that you've carved out of the substance of your own mind and your own warlike consciousness. You've taken the image and everything that he taught. You've said, well, maybe later. And feeling justified in such. And there is reason why you should, because there's power in that. Religion of mind is a thing. The mind is a powerful, powerful thing. It's the reason why we try so many metaphysics, The Secret and such, is that the substance to which we are using to carve Jesus' image into is the substance, it's a reality on this planet. And it does have power. It does achieve ends. Does it achieve God's will? Well, that is the problem. Because when we're trying to make it what we want, it doesn't. We may get what we want, but that doesn't mean that it is what we need or what is good, or it's certainly almost guaranteed not to be what is best. It's what they call brain hacking, where you can actually mobilize yourselves on higher levels to get what you want. Tell the universe what you are expecting and marvel at how it occurs for you somehow. Think that that means it's God's blessings. No, that is just the efficacy of a good luck charm. The utility of superstition. And in the end, in embracing that, in the absence of embracing the Father who sent Jesus, who finds us in recognition of unity across all cultures, all beings, on and off this world, in the absence of that, you're just playing games, right? Games that unfortunately you can only recognize as war. Your little Buddha of war is at war with everything, isn't it? You're irritated by everything, aren't you? Still defaulting to fear in every social exchange, aren't you? Maybe covering it up with a little bit of cultural Christian kindness, smile that you use as a shield, behind which a sword is hidden. The ability to say, oh no, I love all people. Just need them to be like me. Man, there was so much else I wanted to talk about, but I just had to get to this point, um, sooner than later. I guess the bottom line here is that the idol that we're making of Jesus, when we call ourselves Christian, but we do not strive to be Christ-like in every way, more and more, well, that's about to be dashed upon the rocks. I mean, in one way, you could consider it judgment. From my perspective, I see it as the mercy that comes before judgment. The curtailing of your ease-drifting souls that have for so long been living as if God is something that you created only. That little Buddha of war in your mind will never be big enough to contain what Jesus truly is and the Father that Jesus truly conveys in the Holy Spirit. You'll never be able to trap him in some sayings in a book. The only thing you can do is broaden the aperture of your consciousness such that it may flow unrestrained. A love unconditioned. For your fellow man, woman, and child, and for those that you do not consider to be your fellow man. Until that happens, you are the one stuck on the sinking ship. And you may discover that when things go your way, it is not the blessing you thought it would be. It is the curse. Not that you have been fooled, but that you have made out to fool yourself. And so what comes next? Well, let's put it this way. The clothes of Jesus that you have put on the warlike Buddha statue of yours, well, they come from someplace real as well. They can be taken away just as easily as they were given. You will find there is a certain kind of nakedness that can occur in the mind when that which you were clothing was making no effort to actually become what it was only being made to look like. And if you feel like you're seeing more chaos in the world, more craziness in the world, well, it is very well the case that many, many more people are being defrocked. Their little Buddhas of war in their minds are being defrocked. But if that's all you see, then you're probably undergoing a little defrocking of your own. I'm going to stop there. I may come back to say more maybe by Friday because I wanted to get to something more, but I feel like I should stop there. It's been long, and I think I want to let that point resonate. Yeah. Jesus is real. The Spirit of truth is real. The indwelling Spirit is real. And what they have to offer you is your own reality, eternal reality. But that occurs when you base yourself on them, not when you base them on you. And you will know that you're basing yourself on them when you can see and have comity with others whom you otherwise would not. And if there isn't any such other that you just accept, that you just do not, well, that is you accepting that you will not have such comity with them. And it is there and then that you've got your little Buddha idol stuck. Oh, surprisingly, it looks like even though I've connected my computer directly to the internet, I'm still freezing. So I have no idea how to control that. But hopefully in the future, we'll figure that out. For the time being, we'll stop and hopefully we'll talk again when things are better arranged. And of course, like I said, if anyone ever has any questions or any comments, by all means, please leave them, because a lot of the times, just speaking to what is occurring to me, what impressions I'm getting in the moment can go all over the place. And I can be really much more focused when there is a question that I'm trying to answer. And especially when it's a burning question that has a real centrum of gravity. So, if you see this and you find there's anything you don't like about it, even if you haven't watched the whole way through, please, you don't have to leave a comment on the video. You can DM me or just leave a comment in the Interfellowship where there is a certain amount of anonymity there, and see if you can help this discussion along. All right, that's it for now. See you next time.